welcome back again. My name's Dominic and I run my own practice on safe and fair recruitment. And a big part of my day job is quite simply working with employers across numerous sectors in order to empower them to provide opportunity to people with criminal records. Prior to starting up my practice around 5 years ago, I was the legal officer for a social justice charity called NACRO, which many of you may have heard of. And within that time at NACRO, I developed guidance for employers called Recruiting Safely and Fairly, and developed a pioneering employability program, which I'll talk to you about in a few moments. But before we get on to some of my further work, I thought I wanted to start off with a story which is quite dear to my heart and may be familiar in some respects to you guys joining us today. It starts with a story of a child by the name of Jay, and Jay was born and raised in South London. He was brought up by his mother, a single parent who'd fallen into numerous chaotic relationships, and his life had changed forever at age 9 when he found out that the father that he'd never known had actually been murdered at age 16, a few months prior to Jay's birth. Naturally, when he received that information, it had an impact on his mental health and his life going forward. As he went forward into secondary school, he wasn't able to engage with the normal school curriculum. He fell in with the gang. He started to take drugs, started to sell drugs, and he ended up entering the criminal justice system. His criminal record went from child through to adulthood. He started off with being supervised by the youth offending services, then the probation services, but ultimately he received a prison sentence and ended up in custody, serving a 3-year sentence. Now, custody was naturally a challenge for Jay, but interestingly, it was also his first opportunity. It was the first opportunity for Jay to get the support in his life to address some of his challenges with drugs, mental health, and substance misuse. He also was able to develop some skills and qualifications in prison, and he also got the opportunity to work. He became a trusted prisoner, and he ended up working or released on temporary license for a local employer. He also took up sport, and sport was really important and powerful in Jay's life in being able to give him some of the confidence, self-esteem, determination, resilience. He changed his life around and put down the drugs and alcohol, and effectively the Taekwondo community, or the Muay Thai community as it is now, became his new family, and he moved on to make some positive relationships in his life. Now, why is Jay holding his head in his hands now? It's because although he's developed new skills, although he's worked hard to change his life around, he's routinely turned away by employers and, in fact, recruitment agencies. And the reason he's turned away is because of the fact that he has a criminal record. Now, that doesn't just impact Jay. His inability to access employment has led to impact on his family, because he is now a father himself, and the struggle that Jay has had accessing employment has led to the family experience other problems in their lives. And that is a really important lever for me in the work that I do and others that I know do, to break that circle, that ripple effect that goes round and round and round. And that's becoming more and more important, because it's not just those who end up in custody, as we know, that face barriers to access employment. It's those in the community, many of which may have never been supervised by probation or may have never been to prison, but they're still affected by that barrier of having a criminal record. And the stats keep going up and up, as we would expect them to do. So these are the most recent stats on us having 12.3 million people in England and Wales having a recordable conviction in the police national computer. Now, by my estimate, by my research, that actually equates to a little more than 27% of the working population. So it's a huge proportion of the working population that has some form of criminal record. Now, a few years ago, when I was still at NACRO, I was approached by a local job centre, DWP district down in Bedfordshire, and they had numerous challenges in that they had very, very many national employers, large employers in their vicinity, and lots of individuals who came from, although I don't like to put people in groups, the system puts people in groups sometimes, and they had many groups that were classed as excluded or disadvantaged. And lots of these groups had one thing in common. Okay, so many of them in that region had contact with the criminal justice system. So lots of people that may have, on the face of it, presented to be in one group, such as a care leaver, also had a criminal record. And that was a struggle to them because, as I said, they had loads of employers in their surrounding vicinity, and they wanted these people to be able to get employment, but the employers would not take these individuals for the sole purpose that they had a criminal record. So this branch of the DWP said to me, look, Dominic, you do really great work in the area of employment. Could you potentially run an employability program, a training program for these individuals in order that they could get, the employers might see them more positively, and we can remove that barrier and they can go on to get employment. And naturally, being the type of helpful soul that I am, my first reaction was absolutely not. Okay. And they were a bit stunned. They thought, well, why would you say no? You know? And I said, well, it's quite simple. I could put these individuals on any course lasting, you know, whatever period of time you want me to last it for, teach them on disclosures and CVs and strategies and all the rest of it. But if the employers won't take them due to their criminal record, then there's no amount of training that I can do on a course that is going to solve that problem. In order to solve that problem, you actually have to engage with and support the employers themselves so that they can overcome their reluctance to take on people with criminal records and learn from other employers that have been doing this for years, many of which that have found recruiting people with convictions to be absolutely brilliant for their business, and often find that those that they've recruited have gone on to be the most loyal and hardworking person that they've employed. So, you know, that's what we need to do, because employers have their own challenges. Many of them say that the legislation is too complex. They need guidance. They need training. They need a bit of hand-holding to get it right. And if you don't put that in, then there's no point putting on a course. So they said, well, could you do that then? Could you put it in? And, you know, that's when I said, okay, let's do that. We've already got guidance, recruiting safely and fairly, that they can utilize. I'll put together some legal briefings, some engagement events, some training for the local employers. And we created a project called a NEAD project. And the name is a classical term, and it is basically to do with the founding of the city of Rome by the Trojans, or the ancestors of the Trojans, Romulus and Remus, where a city, you know, that they built a great, powerful city and great, powerful communities. And that was something that I thought was dear to my heart. And lots of people say, well, why have you gone with a name like that? And just like Marie Claire said, I said, well, because it's my project and I can call it what I want. Anyway, so a NEAD project was a brilliant intervention, right? And what was really important is I couldn't have done and delivered that project by myself. And not coming from that district, I needed to engage with local providers, those on the ground who work with the individuals in that region, who are supporting them, and experts in order to make this project work. And that's what I did. I engaged with local partners who are already experts at working with individuals based on their individual challenges and barriers that they might have faced in being able either to sustain on that program or complete the work trial, or in fact complete and sustain a meaningful employment relationship. So we worked and effectively partnered 50-50 with a wonderful social enterprise that was called Eureka at the time, and then changed the name to Peer. And they did absolutely brilliant work with supporting people, counseling them, mentoring them, one-to-one support. And that was very key to this project going on to become successful. And we had over 3/4 of the participants in this program go on to gainful, happy employment with local employers. And we expanded ANEA project. We took it to other areas of Bedford. We then took it to Manchester for a year, and we brought in probation service when we launched it in Manchester. We brought in educational providers, the colleges, the universities, because we recognized that it wasn't just in employment that individuals faced barriers to opportunities. It was also in the education side of it as well. So we engaged with the colleges, we engaged with the universities, we upskilled the probation officers and DWP colleagues that supported clients with disclosure. And it was really quite a monumental project to be delivering in partnership with others. What did we do next? Well, what we did next is we said, well, you know, can we take these principles of working with employers from a regional perspective and maybe look at it from a sector-based approach? And that's what we did next. By this time, I'd left NACRO, set up my own enterprise, but was continuing to work with them in partnership as others, as I still do to this day. And we were commissioned by the Construction Industry Training Board body to, along with other project partners, again, it's all about working in partnership, to deliver a program called Mind the Gap, which was to create an employment pathway, both in custody and the community, for people with convictions. So that could be people who were serving prisoners, people who were prison leavers, people who were people with convictions supervised by probation, or some of those 12.3 million individuals that just faced a barrier of accessing employment due to their conviction. So Mind the Gap was an England-wide initiative with a particular focus on London, the West Midlands, and the Northwest. Now, within that project, we engaged with over 400 employers, 400 businesses. We engaged, at that time, the New Futures Network was launched, and we engaged with very, very many providers, such as New Leaf, locally in the West Midlands and other areas. And it just became an absolutely overwhelming success. And the legacy to this day is I'm still working with many of those employers that I engage with on an individual basis, employers such as ISG, employers such as Waits, Lend-Lease, Beyond Site, and others as well, and lots of the providers. Now, what was interesting about Mind the Gap is we also started to look at some of the other areas where the system wasn't set up really to do this work really well. So we set up steering groups in the West Midlands, we set up steering groups in Manchester, and we brought in key stakeholders from all over: probation, prison, DWP, employment support providers. And we'd come together, and we still come together, to basically discuss and address some of the critical barriers that could impact an individual being able to take up an opportunity successfully. That could be things such as ID, it could be bank accounts, it could be travel, it could be in-work benefits, all the kind of critical failure points. It could actually just be simply red tape that prevented, partnership working to flow really well. Now, I have a mantra in my work that came and flowed from Mind the Gap. And that mantra is complement, not conflict. It's hugely important to partnership working. And it kind of flows with what Marie Claire was saying at the start today. It's very important. Sometimes people say to me, how am I connected to so many individuals and able to work with them successfully in work such as this? And partly is because I'm looking at the bigger picture. I'm not just looking at what what suits and works for me, but also what suits and meets the challenge that we're trying to address. And in order to do that, which you can't do alone, you have to be able to work positively with others. Okay, so we took the concept of Mind the Gap and we took it to social care. One of the areas that organizations thought you can't get employment with a conviction if you're in social care. Well, that isn't true. Yes, it is more difficult, but social care, we've been doing absolutely loads of great work with over the last few years to support social care employers and in fact, NHS employers to be able to provide meaningful opportunities to people with convictions within their business in variety of roles. So where are we now? You know, just take a few moments before I end to say, what's the current landscape? Where are we going next? Now, during that time and last few years, obviously employers have been struggling to fill their vacancies for a variety of reasons. And many that may have been reluctant in the past to provide opportunities to people with convictions have completely or partly reversed that approach now. And a big part of that is because they're struggling to fill their vacancies for a number of factors. Brexit, aging workforce, COVID-19 are just some of the reasons why. So lots of employers, and you'll realize it yourself in your own organizations, are now looking at other talent pools, including people with convictions. And we also have a large number of people who are what the government might say is economically inactive, that effectively government policy now is around actually driving forward and promoting and championing the recruitment of people with convictions. So the state itself, the UK government, now recognizes the value, they recognize the business case of recruiting and providing opportunities for people with convictions. And they have started to do many things, such as changing the law, reducing the length of time that people with convictions need to disclose. They have their own civil service entrance route and apprenticeship program called Going Forward into Employment that is solely and specifically for people with convictions, mainly in custody, but now also in the community. They have been using Social Value Act and procurement levers to be able to encourage, I would say, employers to put in the recruitment of people with convictions when they are trying to be part of the government supply chain. And many of you will have known that they set up the New Futures Network as well. What I see going forward, this is my prediction. I'm quite good at this. You know, I've got it right quite a few times in the past few years. My big prediction is going forward over the next few years, you're going to find probably less employers who are reluctant to recruit people with convictions, but more saying we need support on how to do it effectively and provide support to individuals within the work relationship. And so a big part of my work now is trying to work with employers and partners such as New Leaf, for them to be able to build into their business the support for people with convictions so that employment relationship can be sustained. And that's my prediction for the future, more on mentoring and support rather than risk aversion, risk assessment, risk management. And the final thing I'd like to say is on January the 18th, right here in the West Midlands, there will be the launch of a Second Chance Charter, which is a joint initiative, the first of its kind, between the West Midlands Police Crime Commissioner and the West Midlands Combined Authority, where they will be setting up a charter in partnership. Again, it's all about in partnership with the public and private sector to encourage and drive through the recruitment of people with convictions throughout the West Midlands. And I'm hoping that all of this great work with great partners such as New Leaf and others and great employers in the West Midlands, that we can actually build a model that is followed by other regions, because to have a combined authority as your partner is a massive lever, that other regions will learn from and continue that great work to encourage the recruitment of people with convictions. Back over to you, Marie Claire.